Ladies and gentlemen, my watch says 5:15, so let's call this meeting to order. And why don't we start, I'll start off. I'm Diana Blake and Vice President of the Board and chairing this evening in the absence of Deanna McHugh. Sarah, you want to be next?
Yes, Sarah Meyer Ryerson, and I'm the Director of the Waverly Public Library.
Laura Fraking, and I am Secretary.
Eric Leong.
Linda Podasky. Elaine Main.
Mike Shearer.
Jim Jansen.
Mark Lenius.
Lauren Billings.
And Lauren is a guest this evening. She's working in a government relations class at Waverly Shellrock School and Wartburg, so she's come to see how the library board operates. Our council liaison is Edie Waldstein. I'm not sure whether she's able to be here this evening, but if we can move to the agenda. And do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda as printed?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And even though he has given his name, we would like to welcome Mike Shear as a new trustee on the board. Would you like just to say a couple of words about your past experience and what you look forward to on the library board, Mike?
My past experience includes never having served on a library board before. But I have had some experience in writing and publishing, and I used to be the editor of a newspaper. And I'm a great lover of books and a fan of libraries, so I hope that I can help the Waverly Library continue to be a good institution, which I understand that it is.
And often he sat over there and reported the council meetings.
That's right. Well, it's because of the people that serve and have served that I think we can give credit to for our town library. Okay, let's take a look at the minutes, which were well done.
I move that we accept the minutes as written. Second.
Any questions here? All in favor of approving the minutes for September, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, let's move to the financials, and Sarah, you want to take over and
Sure.
tell us what's what?
All right, we'll look first at revenues, and you'll notice at the very top on the blue line that we are expecting just over $59,000 this year in our portion of the contract from Bremer County. That first half payment should come at the end of this month, and then the second half will come in April, but we're still anticipating that. As far as the other monthly income from fines and book charges and duplicating, they look very normal. We did not transfer any funds from our library reserve account this month. So it actually was a very normal first quarter. And as we look at all the financials, we can keep in mind that this represents July, August, September. So we're 1/4 of the way through our fiscal year.
Does that mean we don't sign one of those transfer slips?
There will be
tonight?
no transfer
Okay.
slip to sign. All right, I wanted to point something out on the line item detail of the expenses. It would be the file that was titled expense detail. And we talked about the phones maintenance and the photocopier, depending on those decisions. I remembered after our last meeting that those had been budgeted for in different line items based on if we were going to go with a managed system or a rented copier. So you'll notice that in line 6373, we budgeted more this year, 6840 for telecommunications, so that would accommodate a monthly fee for a managed phone service. And that's something that Larry is working very closely with me on. Our tech person, Larry Roth, has helped his company through a decision regarding their phone system. And I didn't realize until talking to him some of the fundamental differences between voice over IP and your telephone system through the phone line. So we'll just be weighing the pros and cons as we work through that. All right. On the summary page for expenses, it's interesting to look at the far right column this month. That tells you the percent expended. And if you use 25% as kind of a marker, being that we're a quarter of the way through, you can see that we are under on personnel, which as that's spread evenly throughout the year, there are a couple months during the year, October being one, which is not reflected here, that has 3 pay periods instead of 2. So there are things coming up that will bring that average up a little bit. Utilities, we expended 27.1% in this first quarter. And I looked back, it does include the summer months, which our utility, our Waverly Light and Power bills tend to be higher. But the big difference I noticed was in our water usage, also in those summer months. And that's something that Building and Grounds will be meeting to talk about too, because we did have a water leak in our pond area. And so some of those water costs will be absorbed after we get that all straightened out. But that was a big factor, was the water usage. So, but I'm not concerned at this point for the rest of the year. Library materials, we spent just under 30%. We tend to have a lot of book sales folks come in the fall when we have new budgets, and so that's pretty normal. Otherwise, there's really nothing of note that I took note of. I can point out a couple of individual checks on your checks list that stand out. There was a $4,637 check to Recorded Books. And you may recall that we talked about our new subscription to downloadable magazines called Zinio. So $3,000 of that is our annual base fee that we pay. The rest of it was spent on content. And again, the other libraries that are in that consortium with us have also bought things to add to the content, which is a shared content. So that was a new.
All the magazine, that whole figure relates to Zinio.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The base fee plus the content we were able to purchase. The Iowa Library Service charge above the $518 was for EBSCO databases, our research databases that the state is able to buy down the cost for us, and we're able to get a really good deal as a public library on those research databases. It tends to lean more toward the public interest periodicals and newspapers, as opposed to some of the more academic databases that you might have access to through Wartburg or the other universities in Iowa if you are a student there or have access. Okay, Iowa Library Association, we paid for our Iowa Library Association conference coming up that all of our desk staff will be attending. So that was just a little over $1,200. We had a number of building-related charges this month. There were 3 to a company called Granger.
That's a new name, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. One is actually for some shelving that was budgeted to put in Brad's office area. There was also a filter, which I assume was for the HVAC system, and some light bulbs, because Brad found that this company was actually cheaper than the state contract. So, and there was a boiler maintenance kit that was the VHF sales. The $693 to Plum Tech was the installation of the water heater in the children's restroom. There were a number of costs associated with that children's restroom. Some was the countertop. We've seen a few of them trickle across the last couple months. Some was the countertop. This is the installation of the water heater.
Sarah, I have a question back on the one on the Iowa Library Association.
Yes.
Both of that's under travel. Is it, I mean,
There are two lines there that are closely related, the training, travel, and conference, but the travel one is technically called travel and conference.
travel and conference? Okay, because I thought it would have been, I mean, it's not going to cost $1,248 to go, but it's the.
For the registrations.
Yeah, registrations. Okay.
Registrations, yeah.
Travel and conference. Thank you.
I see Sarah Mueller has a line there for $112.50 that's highlighted.
Yes, I should have pointed that out. That one will be refunded to the library because there was a little mix-up where we ended up paying her wages for her lifeguarding duties. And that's just a little internal city thing where we've been dividing out. She actually works for the city in two separate departments, so Jane caught that, and we're gonna get that fixed.
Back on the big spreadsheet for the whole year, there's some stuff printed in red. Is there a reason? Is that to call our attention to something
Yes,
about the
those,
middle?
those were the ones that we talked about last month as having changed from the original budgeted amount to an amended amount. And that was based on those decisions that we're still waiting to make on a phone system and a copy machine. So if we, that will even out with the funds that were budgeted in those other lines that I pointed out, the telecommunications line and the rents and leases of equipment that we budgeted more for, so.
Back on that same spreadsheet, I have a question on, so for example, like line 6425, and like 6415, we talked about like the leasing of equipment, like the copy machines, all those, where I see those numbers from the actual of 13 and 14 to the budget for 14, 15 changed quite a bit. Is that just reallocation from different lines? Oh.
That was that particular one was reallocated from, under miscellaneous contracts, the photocopier line, because we were exploring the idea of leasing a copy machine instead of buying this time. We've been talking to, and that decision hasn't been made yet, but at the time that we budgeted for this a year and a half ago, we were talking to City Hall about how they manage their copy machine leases or purchases and trying to figure out the best way to do it that would make the most sense.
Okay.
Welcome, Edie. Glad
I'm
you.
sorry, I apologize for being late.
That's perfectly all right. I let our viewing audience know that you probably would be here.
Yes, good.
Okay, any more discussion about financials, everybody? Questions? Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move that we approve as per standing resolution, and I found the resolution. Would you like me to read it?
Well,
just
yes.
for the new people that haven't, what?
Are you speaking
Oh.
into your microphone?
All right. It says, having diligently reviewed for the period just now reported, the list of duly requisitioned disbursements made by the city on behalf of the library out of monies held to the credit of the library and the city library funds. The board, and this is what we're doing, the board hereby approves and ratifies retroactively all such disbursements and directs that such list of disbursements as presented be attached to the minutes of the meeting. So I move that we approve as per standing resolution, and that's it.
Sounds like a lawyer wrote that.
I think Art Hesberg did write
Art
that.
Hesberg, okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we are ready to talk about Bremer County Library Association and our county contract budget request.
Well, I should start off by saying that our Greenville County Library Association meets twice a year, and it's a trustee from each of the county each of the cities in the county, each of the city library boards in the county that are the voting members of that organization. And so to take some pressure off Deanna in her multiple roles that she's serving on our library board and foundation board right now, Mike Scherer has kindly agreed to take over that role. And it's going to be baptism by fire next week because he will be the president of the Bremer County Library Association meeting next Tuesday night.
Way to
So,
go, Mike.
yeah.
We can hardly wait to see how this goes.
So, but the big decision that's made by that group in the fall is to bring together the requests from each of the library boards as to what they would like the request to the county to be for the 15-16 fiscal year as far as the budget request. Then those requests are averaged at the meeting, and that percentage is taken to the supervisors. So what we need to do tonight is settle on what would we like our budget requests to reflect from the County Board of Supervisors. And it occurred to me late that I had done the work last year of pulling together these numbers just to give you a feel for how things have gone over the past years. So the sheet that you received today shows since the 2004-5 year up until the present year, what has our county contract been. And you'll see in 04-05, it was $130,000. And this year it's $181,000. And that contract then is split up amongst the 7 libraries according to a formula, partly based on circulation to Bremer County residents, and partly based on the percentage or how much we spend on materials every year. So the county is bound to contract with someone to provide library services to the rural Bremer County residents. That's in Iowa code that they will do that. And this is how we've done it since the 1980s, that they would contract collectively with the Bremer County Library Association, and then we divvy it up according to this formula. So last year, you'll notice that the the increase requested by the county association was 8.6%. And the actual increase that was received was 0.56%. And you can kind of see the history there of the asking and what has been received. And I will say, too, that in the past, the argument has been made to try to bring the county's per capita level of support up to that of the city's average per capita support. And the per capita support by each of the cities to their own city residents varies amongst cities. But if you average those out, you may remember in that letter that it was somewhere around $60 per capita was the average spent by city residents for library service. And the average amount for county residents was somewhere around $25 per capita, or just under 30. So,
Do you think the supervisors understand that? Is that presented to them every year?
that is presented. And it's, it would be a leap to do that all at once. I think over time, we were hoping to make progress on that. And also, compared to other counties, I think our county does well by us. So there's a happy medium to hit there somewhere. And if there's, a different formula by which someone feels we should be approaching this, or a different angle to approach it from, be open to that.
I was at the risk of sounding cynical, is there any influence that we have on them? Or do they just take the available dollars disperse it how they see fit.
My sense is, you know, each year they probably look at what's available after, you know, looking at some of their other requests and needs. And maybe that's where, because it's split up among a number of libraries, we don't have specific needs to point to that are actually fall at the feet of the county supervisor solely to provide. I don't know of any, other than, I don't know of any special influence that we have there, other that, you know, we provide services to Bremer County library residents just the same as we would to anyone who lives in the city. And then, you know, the larger picture there is that we also provide library services to folks outside of the county through the open access program, because that is highly encouraged by the state library as a reciprocal borrowing. So there is that sense that if you pay for library services somewhere, you know, it's all considered equal in the grand scheme of things. So
The Board of Supervisors is always interested in the presentation and asks good questions and supports libraries, but 0.56 last year was, we're going in the wrong direction.
Dramatically.
Yeah. It's only better than the 0.0 back there in 10 and 11. So I would hope that our economy seems to be a little bit more robust this time, that they will be a bit more open to increasing that. But what do we want? Last year we thought 7% was reasonable. And we have always stated what we needed. We haven't really downplayed anything, but what's in everyone's opinion? We need to come up with a figure this evening.
I guess I have a question. This goes back to more selling the idea to the supervisors. This is going off kind of Jim's comment. How much do they actually look at that number? I mean, if we say any number, do they even consider it, or do they basically already have a number in mind based on the budget and their allocation of it?
see, I guess that's my question, because, you know, there hasn't been a direct correlation between our asking and the amount that we've received. So that would be my question, is whether we need a different approach or,
Or they see us as a service that they're gonna have anyway, and so we'll just allocate a certain amount to.
seeing the state doesn't mandate how much or at what level they need to support.
I have heard over the course of time that Bremer County is good to libraries, the supervisors are, and that many of the counties in Iowa do not support libraries. So,
Well, and I will say some of the counties too they're sadly neglecting their library services. So I think our county has done right, you know, by libraries in the amount of support they've given.
okay, let's come up with a figure.
So if I'm seeing the figures right, their current support of 0.56% is roughly at the $25 per capita level.
The 181,000 altogether would be at that level, yeah. Well, actually, that number was probably calculated off the 180 or 177.
So just as a starting point for discussion, I'd like to suggest 3 or 4%, just as a number. I feel it's extremely arbitrary. I am not basing it on anything. It's just something that says we would like to see their contribution per capita increase somewhat, and giving them a reasonable figure, rather than us trying to say an 8% or 7%, which I suspect they can't make up that much in 1 year anyway.
Right.
So rather than looking like we're antagonizing them, perhaps a figure of 2 or 3% would be at least more reasonable on that. Again, knowing that there's not a direct connection between what we suggest and their results.
Do you have any problem with that figure? I don't, but looking at what Denver and Janesville and Plainfield and Reedland, those libraries requested 6, 8, 10.
But it's a simple average, right? So I mean, if we say
Everything is-
3, it's gonna get diluted down by those other
Yeah.
places anyway. And I go with Jim, I'd say 3%, just to say the rate of inflation. We just wanna cover the increased costs, or increased cost to us.
Well, and maybe say that it would be nice to see that the per capita spending for the county raise at least to half, make a progress toward that $60 per capita for city residents, but perhaps up to 30 per capita, which might give them a different approach on how to look at their money, that we're looking at it differently also.
We had this discussion last year, a lengthy discussion about how often, many times I remember we requested 10%. And because, you know, the need's always there, and the need is rather dire for some of the smaller libraries. And I remember we had this same discussion about being very reasonable about it and, you know, not asking for 10% just because we sure could use that. I don't know if going from, you know, 7% down to 3% might be a little generous or lose a lot of ground or whatever, or if it would deflate the other libraries' requests too much. But I agree that we be as reasonable as we can, and with this goal of getting it. And I think Diana's idea is a good one of stating it perhaps in those terms rather than in the general terms of, you know, percent need. I think 3 might be a little low, but whatever.
I think we're always reasonable about what we ask. Perhaps we need to be more realistic on what the results of the asking are. So 3 or 4%, that might, at least it might bring up a different discussion at the county board meeting also. And
Except, do they see this chart also? Or do they just see the bottom line?
I don't think this one has been presented to them.
Not to them.
One of the supervisors did ask at one time to see a record of circulation, as far as, which is one way to measure usage
Yeah.
of the library by county residents, and that was provided. But, and they could see,
So they would only see the average.
actually, they would have all this information, but, you know, this could be presented to them this year as well.
so they could have a sheet like this.
Sure.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt. And then just if the discussion we're having here, when Mike sits down next week with the board, just discuss with them that the difference in reasonable and realistic, and maybe begin to approach this per capita idea instead of just a percentage idea. Just a discussion.
Curious, Eric, do you have any insight being a library person?
No, not to this level of
Not.
this discussion, no.
College libraries and
Well,
small
is there a
town.
way, did everybody get a copy of this letter online? This was our last year's request. And there's a lot of words there, and I'm just wondering, is there a way to graphically show in just a small chart that paragraph,
Sitting our paper on the, I like that.
that paragraph about the 25% per capita, $25 per capita, and $61 spent by cities? Is there just a way to have like just one little chart of
Sure.
things or something so that they're not reading all these words that went over my head the first time and I had to come back and look again?
Yeah, we certainly could incorporate that in the letter. Usually after the request is set at the October meeting, then the librarians get together in November and try to get the information ready to go to the supervisors with our annual report and this letter with a request. So we could definitely put that in.
Are you asking for a county average or a city-by-city figure?
I was just looking at the figures that were here. The $25 is what the Bremer County is offering libraries per capita, whereas the cities are spending $61 per capita. So
But
just
is
a
that
way
an
to
average for
show-
the cities?
That's an average.
Average, okay.
show those two in some way so that maybe it would catch their attention. One other idea, which is kind of a fun idea that we saw when we visited libraries, was that I think it was the Cedar Rapids Library, had done their request to the city, was it, in a children's book format, and had children presenting it. I'm thinking, like 4-H or something, presenting this to them so that they get a feeling that, yeah, libraries are important too.
I think they had Girl Scouts in Cedar Rapids presented.
Was that at the city level? Do you remember?
Yes, it wasn't the county,
Yeah, but,
in Lynn County.
4-H would be the county
uh-huh.
type organization.
That's another thing that could be
Just a
discussed next week, just an idea. Okay. Does someone wish to present a motion on a percentage based on our discussion here now?
I would make a motion that we propose a 3% increase from 14-15, or from 13-14 to 14-15.
Based on discussion, do I hear a second?
I second.
And more discussion?
I have a
Or-
quick question.
Yeah.
Sarah, when you were in these meetings from 2005 to 2010, it was fairly good support. Not that we don't have good support now, but there was kind of a distinct break, and support maybe started to wane. Was there anything that changed during that time period that you
You
can?
mean in our actual numbers or in our asking?
No, our asking stayed fairly constant. We've kind of drifted lower with our watching what we actually receive. I mean, I think that goes back to we keep getting less and less, so we keep asking for less and less to stay correlated. Was there something that happened during that time frame that maybe caused them to start to reduce what they gave us?
Well, I think, I kind of look at it as the break really came after the 2008, everything that happened in 2008, and with the economy that there was a break after that when it finally affected the tax money that they had available. So I think, in my opinion, it was just the money wasn't there.
I think the state has there've been some shifts in the state passing some expense back to the counties. And mental health is one of the things that I can remember reading a lot about, that the counties have had to assume a greater level of support financially for those services. And I don't know how many others there would be, but I have read a lot about that particular situation, that the counties have commented on that frequently.
Jim, was your motion based on 14-15 and then looking at 15-16?
Correct. My years, I think, were incorrect. It should be from 14-15 to 15-16.
More discussion.
I'd just like to note again, my 3% is a very arbitrary number.
It usually is
Usually is.
when we throw this out, it usually is. Well, let's see what happens. Because we're sending Mike off to present this.
Oh, but he's the president, he has to be neutral.
Okay, yeah. All in favor of Jim's motion of 3%, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, let's do it, and there's plenty to discuss with the county library board, so we'll see what happens after that discussion. Okay, let's move on to committee appointments. We need to approve some committee appointments, and Laura Frerking has been indicated a willingness to serve on the Special Projects Committee. That's where Deanna McHugh was, but she is moving off because of all her other activities. And I think Laura has already been to a meeting and had good comments, so do I hear a motion to approve Laura Frerking for our Special Projects Committee?
I so move.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, not that anyone would. And since we're sending Mike Scheer to be president of the Bremer County Library Association, I think we should formally appoint him to our Bremer Library Association Board. Do I hear a motion to do so?
I would so move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, everybody, we've got good people on these committees, and they will serve well. Let's move on to this, our presentation on the digitization of the historic Waverly newspapers.
All right, well, our librarian Jillian Rutledge is our expert on this project. She was not available tonight, so I said I'd go ahead and give a short presentation on this project. We've been talking about digitizing collections for quite a while, and we've got a few different collections to work on, and one is our historic newspapers, which many of which are on microfilm already. The other is our Waverly Historic Photos collection, and that's a completely separate project. What I'm going to be talking about tonight are the newspapers. And the reason I'm talking about this right now is that the next item on our agenda tonight is that the Special Projects is recommending that we spend up to $2,000 of our custodial foundation money, which is under the control of the library board, to get that project started. So I'm just going to explain how we're going to approach it. I had a very snazzy, short little presentation made up tonight on Prezi, and the flash drive was not cooperating with me here tonight, or the software that's on the laptop. So I do have some photos to flip through just to give you a visual, but I'll just talk you through the rest. So you have a picture in front of you. If you switch your monitor to, it must be the B side, you'll see what I see on the laptop. This is what the reels of microfilm look like in our case at the library. When the library was built, we were able to do the proper housing for the microfilm. There were, over Waverly's history, there have been a number of newspapers in Waverly, and I think many of them were overlapping at times. Some maybe lasted 20 years, some longer. They would be sold and then come into a new name. So we have newspapers on microfilm in our collection dating back to 1856, all the way up to 2004. And they might be under the name Waverly Democrat, Waverly Independent Republican, the Bremer County Independent, the Waverly Journal, the Waverly Phoenix, and I think there was even one that was just called the Independent Republican. So lots of variety there. And actually the Waverly Phoenix was a German language newspaper that ran about 20 years in time. I believe it was the 1890s to the a little after 1910, 1915. So really interesting information is there, and the way that works is to archive something, a resource like that, you want to get it onto microfilm before the paper copies deteriorate, which we've done in most instances here. The State Historical Society of Iowa, they also receive a subscription of our Waverly newspaper. So twice a week, the Des Moines office receives our newspaper, which is good because our copies that are used in the library aren't always complete when they're finished being used. So when the microfilming happens, we'll actually use the State Historical Society's copy, and it will be sent to Advantage Preservation, which is a company in Cedar Rapids. They're actually the company that the State Historical Society of Iowa contracts with for their archival space of microfilm. So a service copy would be made for us that we can bring back to our library and make available for people to use. Then there will also be 2 master copies which are kept by the State Historical Society of Iowa. So if our building were to burn down, blow away, or someone were to walk out the door with one of our reels of microfilm, it wouldn't be lost. We would still have the backup copies from the state that we could order another service copy from. This is what the drawer system looks like at the library. We have about 2 units that are full of these. What we're proposing to do is start the digitization project with Waverly newspapers, first of all. There are also other newspapers that we can move to after that that have been more recently microfilmed, like the Tripola Leader. There's a Sumner newspaper. There's a Plainfield newspaper. And many of those are microfilmed and in our collection as well. But we have chosen to start at least with the Waverly paper because, you know, at the time it was probably covered a wider area. And we would start with the oldest newspapers first. Part of that has to do with copyright, that the newspapers that up to about 1920, we would have the freedom to take our microfilm and digitize it and make that available on the internet. Advantage Preservation could set us up. They would have a server for us. We could point people to the right URL and they could search it from there, and that would be no problem. For newspapers from 1920 on, there are some copyright rules and regulations that come into play, and we could keep a copy in the library for searching, and we could digitize it and use it in the library and for any patrons that come in the library. But if we want to make it available on the internet, then we need permission from the Waverly newspapers, which we hope we can get. I think the digitized copies would be of great help in their own research when they do retrospective stories. We answer questions as librarians. There are students who use the newspapers, and as well as just the genealogists and the local historians in the area. Genealogists love these things because they can go back and find the obituaries for relatives that confirm death dates, location of death, that kind of thing. So lots of folks, I think, would be interested in it, and the digitization really makes it accessible. The microfilming is what archives it. I mean, that film is set to have a life of several hundred years, you know. I mean, the trick would be having a machine that will still read it in several hundred years, but the film itself is not going to deteriorate like the paper copy. But digitizing it just makes it so much more accessible. And what we've done in the past is we've created our own index to the newspapers, which is what librarians have been doing for hundreds of years. And we've had a reader who will go through the newspapers as they come in and just highlight maybe a business or a prominent name that was in an obituary, some big event in the city, and put that in our index. So you know that we catch some things, but not everything. Whereas when we get a digitized copy, anything will be searchable. Any name will be searchable, and there will be some advantages to that. I was just looking at a page of our own index, and this was from, I just turned to a page. I didn't even look. There's several obituaries for different folks from different years of the newspaper. There's an article here about Mae Francis, who she was the first woman superintendent of schools for Bremer County Schools back in the 1920s, 1930s. And this was an article about how she as a teacher then became an author because she went on to get a PhD and do some pretty serious writing in the educational field. In 1969, there was an article about a man, Stephen Frederick, that got a Bronze Star during the Vietnam War, a downtown fire in Frederica, in 1924 when the Methodist Church burned in Frederica. These are the kinds of things that are indexed and would be searchable. Oh, that's the picture of the index I was reading from. This is what our microfilm reader looks like. This is one of those pieces of equipment under miscellaneous contracts that we continue to pay an annual maintenance fee for, light bulbs and things like that, but it's a vital machine because that collection is not accessible without it. And that's what the microfilm reels look like. So as far as cost of this project, it costs about $95 per reel to have that reel digitized. All total, in our collection, there are about 200 reels of microfilm that are just Waverly newspapers. So we're approaching the $20,000 mark as far as what the whole project would cost to digitize all of the Waverly newspapers. So where we're starting and where I think makes good sense is to ask for enough to digitize about 20 reels, which depend, and it's hard to say how many years that will cover because it depends on if the newspaper was a biweekly or how many pages it had, that kind of thing. But so the $2,000 will cover 20 reels.
Sarah, would Jillian be interested in approaching the Waverly newspapers to see if they're interested in helping with this project?
Well, yes, financially, you mean? I think we could. We've attempted at this point to contact the owners to obtain copyright for those years that would take us up to the present. And as a side note, those years that were missing between 2004 and say 2013 or, up to present, we just are applying for a REAP grant to get those microfilmed. So that's, getting us all up to date on our microfilm. But as far as going back and digitizing, we were not able to, I'm not sure we were able to speak to the right person in authority to get that permission. We have not obtained the copyright permission yet. So I'm thinking if we're able to do that, then maybe we would look for a partnership to help fund it.
And give credibility to them.
Mm-hmm. See, and I'm thinking, I've been told from local genealogists that there may be some interest in those circles to donate some money toward this. I think they've been talking about it at their meetings. I'm also thinking that once we identify some partners, whether it be our foundation, Library Foundation, our friends group, our local genealogists, that we may have better luck in our applications to the Bremer County Community Foundation if we can identify that we've already got the project rolling and these other folks see it as valuable as well. So,
Sarah, I have a couple of questions. Why is it that since 2004 we haven't continued the microfilming? And would it be the case that you would simply skip a step and digitalize those, or would they have to be microfilmed first?
those are good questions. They would be microfilmed first because that's the archival standard still. Even though microfilming has been around for, quite a while now, it still is seen as the format that is more stable than the print copy or the digital copy right now. So yes, we would still microfilm them. The question about why we have that gap, there's a few reasons. Because we have had a small budget each year to do microfilming, and for a while we were partnering with Wartburg, where I think there was some way that if one of us got it microfilmed, then we could buy a second copy cheaper than we could have it done separately. And I'm not sure, I haven't talked to Eric or anyone else at Vogel yet to find out. There may be a way where we would be the ones that would continue collecting these things, and I'm not sure if Vogel librarians plan on continuing to collect the Waverly newspapers. There may be some overlap there that we don't, that's yet to be determined. But the main issue, though, is that there was some money that the legislature provided to the State Historical Society to do this microfilming in the past that is no longer there. And so now I think that money is coming back through this REAP grant that we're applying for, and we were encouraged to apply for this by the state. So I'm hoping that, I understand they prioritize microfilming projects over digitizing projects right now.
And did you tell us that microfilm is more stable than the digital form?
Yes. I just think the formats for digital copies, whether you're talking about whatever file format is the file format of the day, I just don't think those are near stable enough when you're talking, decades as compared to microfilm.
Who hasn't had a corrupted file? I mean, computer file. I mean, they're easy to corrupt. That's pretty much the state. I mean, it makes sense.
I guess I'm curious to know, what are we talking about when you digitalize? How does that work? What are we going to end up with? Or what will it look like?
Well, in the library, we would have a hard drive that would be internally searchable. If we get it set up so that we have it accessible via the web, all that information would sit on a server at Advantage Preservation, and you would hit the page and just be able to type in a name, and it would search the database. And maybe someone can help me with, it's got, even though the files would be something similar to a PDF, it's got a searchable, it can search that. So, I mean, I think what you end up with is an image of each page as you would page through it.
Yeah, there are options of what the interface would look like, so you can have, as if you were holding the newspaper in front of you, or you can have something that's strictly text-based if you want to go that route. Yeah, the digitization process will definitely make it more keyword accessible, which is that transition from indexes that Sarah was talking about.
So I'm sitting here thinking, a patron came in, would they get or could they get a disc with some of this on it, or would this all be in the cloud someplace? These are probably really naive questions, but I just have to wonder.
Well, right now, the way it stands, if you have a page up, let me go back here. It's a little cloudy, but you can see that there is a page of newspaper up right there on that screen. A person right now can capture that screen pretty easily onto the computer that sits right next to it, and you could stick your flash drive in and save that page. It's only what you see on the screen right there. But right now, you can take that with you or email it to yourself, and I imagine it will be, similar once it's digitized.
Okay,
I think that's all I have.
thank you. So let's move on to approving this project that Special Projects Committee discussed, and we pretty much got this information from both Sarah and Jillian at that meeting. And the Special Projects Committee did approve the expenditure of up to $2,000 to begin this digitation process. Do I hear a motion for our board to approve the expenditure of this money?
So move.
Second.
Second? Okay, any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And then Special Projects brought another project, or is bringing another project to you. It's for up to $250 for music supplies for storytime programs. And Sue Van Emert presented this, where along with the stories, kids are going to actively participate in rhythm exercises, music exercises, movement exercises, and we all know that reading and music go well together, and learning through music has been a standard in curriculum for a long time. So there's all kinds of little items that she plans to use. with the kids. And I had also mentioned that with Michael Pollock, as a staff member who is a trained musician, a degree in music, that we have all kinds of resources to back this usage up with, which is really nice. Our staff has so many skills that they bring to the library that we don't often know about until we require their help. Any questions about that? Laura, do you?
Diana, are these like rhythm instruments?
Yeah, could be rhythm instruments. Here we go. Scarves, using scarves for movement. Here's a rhythm sticks, a rap and tap. Or spots you can put around the floor and kids can move to spots. Little eggs, shaker eggs. In fact, we use those in band that give you a maraca type sound. And so if you're reading in rhythm, bring reading to kids' brains very well. So, and she gave us all kinds of examples here of materials that she's going to order for this project.
And the number of kids that she serves a week was very impressive as well. She would have 40 kids at one group and 20 in another. So the numbers, it's a strong number that would be affected by movement.
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
I move that we approve the $250, or up to $250 to bring music to our story time programs.
Let's second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we are ready for now the report on the Waverly Public Library Foundation.
The only thing I have to report is that we do have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday evening at 6:15. And I apologize that that's been such a hard thing to get rescheduled, but we will have John Tavine present from the Bremer County Community Foundation, or the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa. So we will make a decision one way or another whether our foundation should invest a permanent endowment with the Community Foundation. So Thursday, the 16th at 6:15 p.m., Deanna will be sending out some answers to previous questions from John
And that will be at the library.
at the library.
Does
Okay.
the foundation board have a recommendation to us?
It's a joint meeting, isn't it?
It's a joint meeting.
Yes, a joint meeting. So they will, that's what you'll
They
find
will
out.
have
that-
a recommendation.
Yeah. Okay, everyone get that on your calendar, and it's 6:15 rather than 5.
That keeps the time the same as what it had been when we were trying to tack it on to a regular board meeting. So the times are all the same, we just don't have a regular board meeting that night.
Okay, budget and finance, and we did meet, and Mark was there,
Indiana.
Deanna was there, I was there, and we just got some basic figures in mind and what we need to look at as we get the budget ready. And I think we have another meeting scheduled that first Wednesday in
Last Wednesday in October, the 29th,
29th of October at noon.
noon.
So, and anyone that's interested in looking at figures and having some input, feel free to come. And so at the November board meeting, we'll have a better idea of what is going on, and we can present some information to the board. At the December meeting, the budget will be approved, and they will then go very shortly to the city to get ready for budget hearings. So feel free to come. We try to stay within that hour time because people have places to go, so it's like 12 to 1. Continuing ed for board members.
We had discussed that at a previous meeting, and I talked to Eunice Reesberg, who's with the Library Services of Iowa, the Northeast Division, and she was unable to make it tonight, but I have her scheduled to do a short presentation, maybe 20 or 30 minutes at the November meeting, at our regular November meeting. And I think one of the things she's going to talk about are the updates to the trustee handbook, because that was just revised just recently. So she'll be pointing out some highlights from that, and she could also answer any questions, but since we have newer trustees, that'll probably be a good review. So,
I think on the back page of our agenda, it reminds us that the next board meeting is Tuesday, November 11th, which is Veterans Day, is that correct?
Yep, 11 is
11, yeah,
always Veterans Day.
and at 5:15 at the library, so that's just a reminder. Anyone have any comments, questions?
Just a quick question. Sarah, the last time we talked about our space needs study, you were kind of encouraged that you may have had a breakthrough there in some still high-level services at a more affordable price. Maybe this isn't the time to get into that.
no, I can tell you what I know at this point. I did meet with George Lawson, who is a library consultant, has done a lot of space needs studies, or space utilization studies. That was one thing he talked about, a difference between those studies. In Iowa, he had been the director of the Ames Public Library for about 10 years, and for the last 20, he's been consulting with public libraries on building issues like this. Had a good conversation with him, got an initial quote back from him. If we were to do a kind of a limited needs assessment and a space needs study, which actually was similar in cost to the lower of the two other quotes that I had. And the more I thought about it, I haven't made a decision to go forward, but the more I thought about it, in looking at the options that he provided, I really think the thing that would benefit us most at this point in time would be the space utilization study, just because our immediate need is, as we do the carpet project and rearrange things, and we know some things we'd like to make better in the short term, what could we do with our current space and furniture to rearrange and make it a little bit better? I do feel like the next level of study, I do feel like it would be good to follow up in the near future with a needs assessment and a full space needs study that would help guide us as we look down the road 10 years and see where we're going, and, with the patterns that are happening in Waverly as far as who we serve and what kind of service we're providing, what we might need in the way. But I think the immediate need right now is to figure out how best to use what we have. So that's, I guess, the direction I'm leaning right now. Also, I think, it will take some time. It will take some time to do a full study, and it will also take some time to plan a larger project if that's warranted down the road. So I don't know how the board feels about that decision, but that's kind of the,
Utilization is kind of what we were looking for.
yeah. And that may have been, as I've been honing the terminology and looking at how these studies are done, and so that's the direction I'm.
He has a website, I found it, and his credentials are extensive, to say the least.
Yeah. And he has done extensive work with libraries. I know he's working with some libraries in Michigan and in the Chicago area right now. I have yet to call, well, no, I have talked to some librarians in Iowa that highly recommend him. He's done studies in Iowa public libraries, so.
I think we should move ahead.
Okay.
Or questions, comments? Do I hear a motion for adjournment? Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.